Hello, this is Kelly Hamon, and welcome to the Resiliency Coach podcast. This podcast showcases people who have faced difficult times and how they got through it. These experiences are real and sometimes raw. Please be advised that these podcasts could trigger unresolved emotions. Please also be aware that the people who share their stories are here to tell you you're not alone in your struggle. They share the tools and resources they used in healing. If you're looking for solutions for getting through tough times, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. This is not medical advice. All opinions expressed by the interviewee are their own personal opinions and not necessarily those of Resiliency Coach. So today I'm interviewing my friend, Angel Lyn. Angel has a master's in social work, is a life coach, public speaker, and author. In 2016, she had a crisis in her personal life, which created turbulence that rocked her marriage as well as her personal beliefs and practices. So, Angel, thank you so much for being on my podcast today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for bringing light and inspiration into the world. I'm so excited about this.
We're excited to hear your story too today. So would you share your story with us now?
Yes, I'd love to. My name is Angel, and I am the fourth of 6 children, right in the middle of a pretty large family, and I was born and raised in southern Utah. A major part of my upbringing was being a devout member of a Christian religion. I look back and see how my whole identity and purpose was rooted in the membership and activity in this church. It was every Sunday we were involved, and during the week, even activities sponsored by the church was part of our routine as a family. And the values and the teachings were woven into our everyday lives. I was taught that a core value and priority of God is family, that the family is the central unit of society. So from the time I was a small child, attending our primary classes all the way through my teens and adulthood, there were Sunday lessons, church-sponsored articles and books that repeatedly reinforced the purpose of the family. And for me, as a female, I was taught that being a wife and a mother was the highest achievement and top priority. And we were taught to also to seek out and marry within the religion as well. And to choose a worthy young man, the word worthy was often used, and to be a worthy young woman. But we were taught to marry someone who had served their volunteer mission for the church and was worthy to get married in one of our temples. So that had to do with being chaste and moral and saving yourself until marriage. That then we were to be active and serve in our church and raise a family. So all of those things were my top priority, and I checked all those boxes. I prepared myself. I attended a church-owned school. I served my own volunteer mission for 18 months. And then I met and married a man while I was in college who also met all those boxes. So away we went, fulfilling these goals and dreams and priorities that I had been raised with. And I had gone to graduate school, and as soon as I graduated, I did what I felt was the right thing, and by starting a family and becoming a stay-at-home mom. Within 8 years, I gave birth to 5 sons. That was a lot in and of itself. That's a lot of children in a short amount of time. And I became a stay-at-home mom and also chose to homeschool them. So family life, church life, homeschooling was the center of my world. It's back in 2016, my husband and I were operating a business together, and I was a wife and mom. And then one day I got a phone call. There's a warrant out for your husband's arrest. Now, in that moment, what hit me like a ton of bricks is called an existential crisis in psychology. It's when everything that you thought to be true and real is proven untrue in an instant. So it's like your world is blown up. And the reason this was so shocking was there had not been any indication in our marriage or anything I was aware of that there was any problem like this in my husband's life. And he had been serving in ecclesiastical positions, and he was also very devout Christian. So in that moment, I remember just the flood of fear showing up. How are we going to operate this business? when my husband goes to jail? How am I going to provide for my kids? How am I going to still be their mom? And then it went to, how could I have been married to someone for 14 years and I had no idea there was this private life or secret things going on? And that was shocking, startling. When you've trusted someone and built a life with them, and then there's this moment where you realize, I don't even know who they are. What I did right after getting that phone call was I walked into my bedroom, and I remember looking at the bookshelf. I had collected so many great books and religious books, and I had my scriptures, and I was used to going to resources to help me when I had hard things or decisions to make to find spiritual guidance. And I remember just gazing over the bookshelf and thinking, I'm pretty familiar with that content. And I can't think of one chapter or verse that says what to do when there's a warrant out for your husband's arrest. So, in most times when I turn to the scriptures, in this moment, I needed a direct answer. And for the first time in my life, even though I had prayed all growing up, it felt different. I actually just turned straight to God and said, God, what do I do next? But the intention behind it was total surrender. I remember thinking, I can't call anybody. I don't want anyone to hate my husband or get mad at him, or like, I don't need any drama. I just need an answer. What do I do next? And God's the only place I can go. And so that sincere question, I was willing to receive anything that I got back, like that desperation. And do you know what the answer was? It came as a thought: put chicken in the crock pot. That was the first thought that I got after I said, God, what do I do next? It was put chicken in the crock pot. And I remember thinking, that doesn't make any sense. I could go in and ask again, that's probably just the mom in me thinking. But in that moment, there was such a change. I realized I had done that exact same thing for decades. I had gone to God in prayer, asked questions, rejected the answers because they didn't make sense. They weren't what I was expecting. It wasn't comfortable or convenient. Doubted myself in being able to talk with the divine, and then talked myself out of the answer, and then just went on with my life. Like, I realized in that moment there was a pattern of a lack of faith, where here for 38 years I had thought of myself as this faithful Christian. So I decided, either I put chicken in the crock pot and obey God, or I don't. And I walked to the kitchen and get the frozen chicken out, and I'm putting it in. And you have to understand, I was in shock. Like, my mind was so foggy. But as I put that chicken in the crock pot and I'm thinking, what next? I look over and I see my 5 sons just playing in the living room. They have no idea about the phone call, about the stress of the business, about what was going on with me. And I realized they're going to need to eat dinner in a few hours. God, you're a genius. And so I just put the chicken in the crock pot, started to prepare dinner, and then continued to ask, what do I do next? And where do I go? So this became my daily practice, multiple times a day. I was relying on God like a personal assistant. Like, it was like I had lost all memory, all plans went out the window, and I just kept turning to God. What do I do next? And when the what was answered, then sometimes it was beyond my scope of understanding. I'd have a thought that was like, okay, like one of the times I asked, what do I do next? And it was, call someone to come and help with the business. You need to find someone to kind of take the place of your husband. And I didn't know where to go. And I noticed, that's my question: where do I go? So I turned back into God and up to God and said, where do I go that I can find the right person to handle this job? And when I asked what and where, I was given direction. I was shown and told who to reach out to, a specific person, and that person came in and worked for us and helped us out. So I call this the what and where pattern of co-creating miracles with God. I practiced it every day for months. And there came a time 3 months after this phone call when I said, what would you have me do, God? And the answer was, fire your husband from the business because things are not changing. He's not changing. Tell him to move out and tell him you're filing for divorce. Now that answer again rocked my soul, because I had been raised that families are forever, that when you get married, you're married for time and all eternity. And that we had always said in our marriage, there's no room for divorce. There's only solutions. So when I felt that inspiration come, it was really a moment where I thought, do I listen and trust myself and my programming, Or do I believe that I'm actually communicating with deity right now and trust this? And it took me 3 times of asking to really summon the courage to do that, to follow through on that directive. And then I said, what do I do now? I'm a single mom. I have no idea how to be a single mom. They didn't train me to do that in church. It was all about relying on your husband and being financially provided for. So here I was, a woman with 0 money in the bank, and I wanted to know what to do. What do I do now? And the Spirit said to me, you need to go out away from here, go out of town, go into nature and be alone. That doesn't make sense when you have 5 hungry kids and a business to run. Again, the answers did not seem to be logical. But I took that answer and said, okay, I'm planting it in my heart. That's what you want me to do. Where do I go? And 2 days later, a friend called me and said, hey, I bought a place in Hawaii. Why don't you come visit me? And I thought, hot diggity, God, a trip to Hawaii? That's not a bad thing at a time like this. I got online and I looked up the price of round trip tickets was $590. And tears just came to my eyes. I didn't even have $25. And I thought, God, I can't, how can I get to Hawaii? I can't do this. And it doesn't feel right. And what are people going to think? You know, I could hear assumptions that I had in my mind that someone would think, how could she just take off for Hawaii at a time like this when her family's falling apart? And how could she spend money on herself like that? And that was all this programming and my fears in my own mind coming up. And when fear set in, I realized that I had just disconnected. I had just separated myself from the faithful communication I had been experiencing with God. And that's when I discovered that fear and faith cannot be in the same space. One will overtake the other. So the power of fear was something that I needed to put aside and reconnect to faith, to love, to belief. So I went back in prayer and I said, God, I heard you say that what I needed was time away in nature and that where you wanted me to go was Hawaii. So I want to repent of my fear. Now, this was so interesting. 38 years of being religious, I had never repented of fear, never. And in the moment that I said those words, I felt a flood of love and comfort and peace come over me. And remember the cost of the ticket, $590. The very next day, I got a letter in the mail from my insurance company. It was a reimbursement check. It says, you overpaid your insurance for the last quarter of the year. So here's a check for $590. It was the exact dollar amount of a ticket to Hawaii. So I just put it in the bank and bought that ticket and went. And I want to tell you that that process really secured my understanding of this what and where principle. Ask, what do you want me to do? And where do you want me to go? And avoid asking how and why. I recognized that every time I went to God with, how is this going to work out? How am I going to fix this? How am I going to do this? Or why is this happening to me? That both of those words carry inherent doubt and fear. And so I'm trying to speak to a being of love and I'm trying to get higher answers, but I'm presenting myself when I use how and why with fear. I believe that God cannot communicate to me in that language. It's not the language of love. So I leave the how and why up to God. And time again, as I ask the what do you want me to do and where do you want me to go? And then I just act on those answers with faith and trust, the how is delivered in just the same way that that check showed up, and the why is explained to me after the experience. So that was just one piece of the miracles that happened to me. My life continually got better after this existential crisis as I discovered that I was loved, that I could love myself, and that I could move on and not be destroyed. The whole image when I had that existential crisis is that my life is falling apart, everything's ruined. You know, my brain had spiraled in shame and negativity for just a moment. But when I started to turn inward and upward, that's what I call it. Instead of going outside of myself for help, I turned inward and upward with the what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? I felt so much peace. And I remember my mom saying to me months into this situation, she's like, I'm so amazed at how composed you are with so much chaos going on in your life. And when she reflected that to me, I thought the root of that is trusting in the divine. I don't think I would be this composed or even know how to conduct my life in these moments if I wasn't turning inward and upward all the time. And the beautiful thing that I discovered as well is that my mind, body, heart, and spirit are like my own instrument. I don't know if you or any of the listeners have musical background, but if you've ever tuned an instrument like your guitar or a violin, or even watched performers before they perform, you know how they tune an instrument so it's on pitch and on key before they perform. I discovered that my mind, body, heart, and spirit are like strings of an instrument. They each one need to be tuned to the frequency of truth and love before I take action. And there's a musical term called dissonance, and it's a clashing sound. It's like when two keys on a piano that are right next to each other are played at the same time. That sound, that clashing sound, is called dissonance. And I discovered that there's a feeling in my body when I'm not operating from truth and love, when I'm operating from fear, for example, from fallacy, or anything that engenders, like fear breeds anger, fear breeds resentment, fear breeds shame. When I'm in that energy, there's a dissonance in my body, and my physical body restricts and tightens when there's fear present. And I ask people all the time, where do you feel it in your body when you're worried or nervous or anxious? And they answer me. Everybody, once they stop and think about it, can locate. A lot of times it's in the stomach, or it's a tightening in the chest, or they get around their neck and their shoulder. They get these tight knots. Well, the opposite is true too. I notice that my physical body relaxes and opens up or expands when truth and love is present in what I'm thinking or hearing from somebody else. So I started to learn how to navigate my life and make my decisions based on tuning these four elements of myself. Does this thought bring peace to my mind? Peace is a sign of truth and love. Does my body tighten or expand? I'm going to trust it. Are my emotions anger, fear, guilt, shame, resentment, or are they peace, love, hope, joy, freedom? And then my spirit is the one that I trust. When I go inward and upward, I like to close my eyes. It's a form of a prayer. It's just different than the way I was ever taught, to close my eyes and include picturing my spirit. And I see my spirit body, or my true essence, as the pure me that has no fear, no ego, is ageless, not programmed by the world. So when I close my eyes, it's like I shut the door on all the programming and conditioning of the world. Anything I've been told, I have to do this, I should do this, you need to be that. All of that stays outside. And I picture my spirit, and I ask my spirit to help me communicate with my creator. And I trust the feelings that I get when I ask questions. So, contrary to my prior habit of asking questions, rejecting the answers, doubting my ability to talk to the divine, and talking myself out of those answers, now I've found the exact opposite is powerful. I ask questions, I breathe and receive the answer. I trust that I do have access to truth and wisdom, and then I act on the answers with courage. And that has led me to so many amazing opportunities. My life today is so different than it used to be. I have a new relationship, 3 bonus daughters, healthy, emotionally intelligent sons, a good relationship with my ex-husband, and a very fun and fabulous business as a life coach.
That's awesome. I loved how you said you use the words what and where, and how you've eliminated why and how, and the reason why you've eliminated those words. And the resources or tools that I heard you use are God, and to trust Him as well as to trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it was a process from chicken in the crock pot
Yes.
to begin with, to trust in little things
Mm-hmm.
that added up to big things.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other resources or tools or organizations that
Yes.
helped you through this process?
Absolutely. When I would ask the what questions, God would guide me. I remember one day I just went into a Chamber of Commerce luncheon, And it was, God, what would you have me do today? And I felt impressed, go to this women's luncheon. So I walked in there not knowing anyone, look around at all these round tables, and I said, where would you want me to sit? Like, I was literally using these what and where questions all day long. I just surrendered. I remember thinking, I obviously don't know anything. Like, when this crisis hit, I was like, oh, I've been the one strong arming my life, relying on the arm of the flesh, planning things and making my life move forward. And apparently I don't even know what's going on in the background of my life. So that surrender and submission to God, literally I took into every moment. So I walk into this women's luncheon. Where do you want me to sit? And my heart was just drawn to a seat next to a woman I didn't know. So I walked up and asked, can I sit here? And I said, what do you do? And she said, I teach people how to have conscious conversations. And I had never heard that term. So she explains to me what that is and a little bit about it. And I just walked out from the luncheon that day, very curious about this word conscious. And again, where do I go now, God? And God said, go to the library. I mean, it just comes as a thought. It's not an audible voice. It's just a thought. And when it's not something that's really familiar to me that I would think, or that even sounds like my own personality, that's an indication too, that it's a divine voice. I went to the library, and I kid you not, I walked in, and you know how they display certain highlighted books? They'll put them out on top of the bookshelf and set them on display. I walked into this library, and there's a book, Conscious Living by Gay Hendricks. So 2 hours earlier, I had never even heard of the genre or the realm of writing. And then I meet this lady that teaches people about conscious conversations. And then I walk into the library, and there's a book on display. I took it off the shelf, sat down right on the floor, right between the aisles, or in the middle of the aisle, and started reading. So God led me to great books. That genre of consciousness. I read books by the Arbinger Institute, like Leadership and Self-Deception, and then the follow-up book, Anatomy of Peace. Fabulous and insightful books that brought my attention inward. So the realm of consciousness taught me to look at me. And because of this pivot in my life, it prevented me from perpetuating shame and blame onto my husband, for using him as the scapegoat for why things had gone wrong. And it showed me how to grow and evolve in love. So I also read A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. Fascinating book. Gay Hendricks has Conscious Living, and then the follow-up is Conscious Loving, on how to bring consciousness into a relationship. Then I was led to The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And one of my all-time favorites is called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. I listened to that 3 times because I was a little stubborn and hard-headed, and it was a radical thought-shifting book. But by the 3rd time, I felt mentally liberated from judgment that I wanted to have about myself and my husband and people in general. So these books came into play. And the other resources were mentors. I saw a great therapist for a short time, but I relied on mentors and coaches as well. So people would show up in my life, and the support as well. I had great love and support from many members of my church community and friends and my family. So I would say that during that time, all of these resources felt like a life raft or a life preserver that kept me from drowning. And I absolutely am so grateful, especially the books. One of the gifts was that during this time when I needed to start generating income, I decided to just start cleaning houses for people. That was the easiest thing I could start doing. That's what I had done for so many years as a mom, right? I know how to clean houses. So I started picking up some jobs. And the miracle was that while I was cleaning houses, I could listen to audiobooks. So for hours and hours a day, I was getting my own mind reprogrammed, my thinking, my paradigms, my beliefs, and turning to my soul. The books in consciousness turn you inward. And really, as I was cleaning these homes, I was cleaning out my own mind, body, heart, and spirit. It was so beautiful, transformational. And I believe that I came out on the other side of that 2 to 3 year period of where I was cleaning house and just consuming books, one book after the other, a transformed being. I don't think that my personality even reflects who I was in the earlier years. I am someone now who overcame, first discovered through this process, and then overcame limiting core beliefs. And there are very common human limiting core beliefs. And the ones I had, I see in so many people: a fear of failure, of doing it wrong, Like, I did not want to disappoint God, and the whole programming that you get married and you're married and to be together forever. Like, that was one of the fears that showed up, is if I get divorced, am I disappointing God? So a fear of failure. I had a fear that I wasn't good enough. And this was earlier on in the marriage, not just pertaining to this time period, but fear that I'm not good enough. And I was always trying to be the best wife and mother I could be and friend, and still carried this, I'm not good enough. And when you feel like you're failing or afraid of it and you're not good enough, you also tend to fear that you're not lovable. And then the lowest, deepest, painful core belief, I believe, is the one that says, I'm not worthy or I'm worthless. And those were things that surfaced during this time that I realized held me back as a human and kept me from not only not able to love myself fully, but when I couldn't love myself fully, I didn't have unconditional love to give to a partner or to my children. So as I cleaned out my inner vessel, these beautiful truths came forward. I am worthy. I am enough for me. I am enough for God, and God loves me. And that joy, it just consumed my being and brought light and hope and love into my life. And it radiated in all directions, healing relationships and bringing opportunities into my path.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, and the promise of understanding, and that you can understand that you are worthy, you are enough, and you are loved, and that you have the love that can heal you, and you are lovable to be healed. I love that. And I love those questions, what and where, and that the resources you used were things that helped you work inward.
Mhm.
And they were things that you were led to by asking the what and where.
Mhm.
And a lot of it was books and people.
One of the amazing things that I did not ever expect that I would do was to start writing my story. So when I asked, what do you want me to do? God said, tell your story. And I said, no, it's okay if I just keep this quiet. And God said, no, I want you to tell your story. So in that process, I found a publisher. Again, it's a miracle. But I was introduced by a friend to a publisher named Kira Polson, who owns Freedom House Publishing. And I told her my story and that I was interested in writing it. She said, I want to publish your book. I publish women's sacred stories, women who write in the realm of consciousness and spirituality. Now, again, those are things I had not heard of months prior, and here I am. And so I was able to participate with a team of 18 female authors. And this year we published a book called Collaboration with the Divine, a sacred communion, women's sacred stories. And I have one chapter in that story along with all these other women. And that was such a beautiful and fun project as well. That came out in February of 2022, and it's available on Amazon. And one of the reasons I participated is that this publisher is creating the Centers of Hope, and they are to be spiritual healing centers for people with suicidal ideation. And so all of the profits, 100% of the profits from that book, as they're sold on Amazon, is going to fund the Centers of Hope. So the way that identity, security, and meaning in my life has just continued to evolve. Like, who am I? Where do I fit? Who am I hanging out with? I mean, the beautiful connection to other women who also are communicating with the divine. It helps me to realize, like, I'm not weird and I'm not making this up. As I read through this book and here's all these other women who have had amazing and miraculous and hope-filled stories. And then for us to get to also be conduits of love and light and serve the population, the people who are struggling the most with hopelessness and feelings of worthlessness. So that's just been one of the beautiful gifts of this whole experience.
That is so awesome. I think that there are many people that are looking for ways to make a difference in the world, and they don't know how.
Yeah, that's the question that stops us. Thank you for saying it that way, because I hope all the listeners stop and think about, when do you feel stuck in your life? Like, a lot of us will say, I'm stuck or I'm trapped or I'm struggling. And I have discovered that bringing the how, when you're fighting against the how am I going to make it through? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to fix my marriage? That question, I want you to play with it. I want to invite people to experiment and see if you have the same experience I do. That very question brings fear and doubt and confusion into your mind. And your mind has this way of operating that it seeks to find evidence to validate what you're believing. And they call that the RAS system, the reticular activation system. It's a function in the brain that wants to validate what's already there. And so if you're saying, how is this going to happen? You're going to get stuck. And so the questions what and where are open-ended, and I feel that they're truly faith backed. They're backed by faith. You're asking with a desire, with real intent, and a belief that says that whatever you give me, I'm going to follow through on. So there's total trust there. And so I hope that your listeners will practice that. I would love to know what kind of experiences they have moving the obstacles out of view, out of their mind's eye, and bringing faith, hope, and trust into their lives. What is possible?
When I talk with people about the obstacles that they feel are standing in their way, I often use the analogy of a rock, a little rock that maybe even a pebble. You pick it up off the ground, and if you're holding it at arm length or even looking at the ground, you see how tiny it is. But if you bring that rock, that pebble, up to your eye, really close to your eye, and you have the other eye closed, what does it look like? It looks like a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
But when we can distance it with curiosity, it no longer is a thing that's standing in our way, and we realize what that really was. It was just a pebble.
Yeah. When I think back to that obstacle in the moment when I felt like I was supposed to go to Hawaii for some reason, and the money amount was this obstacle that seemed huge and insurmountable, until I repented of my fear. And having done that, the miracle that came was, not only did I spend 2 weeks just healing, I was reading books, I was sitting by the ocean, I was talking to God. But on the way home from that trip, I said, God, what do I do with this? Like, I've had such tremendous healing. I came home with a roadmap of what to do next. So that's why God wanted me to go away from the stress and the chaos and the daily life of all the pressures I was dealing with. So I went away and I had all this time to figure out what I was going to do next. And that's when God had said, clean houses for a while. And just all these things came to mind on the flight home. I said, well, what more is there? What do I do with this great experience? I said, Angel, bring other women to Hawaii. And that was a whole other piece of my professional development and career development, is I started hosting women's retreats in Hawaii in 2017. And 6 months after I had that impression, I was back in Hawaii with 50 women, 50. I mean, I was like, I don't remember ever planning to be a tour guide or, an organizational planner or a host or anything, but it was totally God-led. And here 50 women converged on the North Shore of Oahu, and we had a healing week where I got to share and model for them the things that God had led me through just 6 months prior. So that's another example of, like you're saying, when that obstacle seems so big, it completely blinds us to the possibilities and to the abundance and to the resources. So if we can learn how to remove that, well, I shouldn't say how, I'll go back to ask God, what do I do about this? And then let God just deliver the how. When it's removed, then your vision for things opens up. I would have never believed that I could have so much fun and earn money going on trips to Hawaii. Doesn't that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, sounds like a great plan. Now, if somebody was going through something similar that you've gone through, or the exact same thing, what piece of advice would you give them?
I believe a simple quote that I heard during this time of struggle in my life really opened up miracles. And it was, you don't know what you don't know. So that sounds very simple, but it came with this illustration. It was a circle drawn, and the circle represented all the knowledge and information that exists. And then there was a tiny pie piece colored in, and it said, this piece represents what you know. And then there was another little pie piece next to it and says, this is everything that you know you don't know. So there are things that exist, subjects like car mechanics that I know exist and I know I don't know anything about it. Heart surgery, I know it exists and I know I don't know anything about it. But then outside of those two little pie pieces is this mass of area. And that was labeled on this diagram, what you don't know, you don't know. And it was so eye-opening that throughout my life, whatever problem or issue came up, I was just pulling answers from those two little pie pieces of what I thought I knew and what maybe someone else knew. And just the diagram and the idea, you don't know what you don't know, led me to start reaching into other directions, sources, people, books, ideas that maybe my ego mind had rejected. Because if it didn't align with what I thought I knew, what I thought was right, what I thought was true, I would kick it out for years and years and years, reject it. That's not true. And I started to discover my ego in this process, that my ego is the opposite of my soul. My ego and my soul are two different beings. My ego is this programmed, conditioned part of me that thinks in statements of fear. And my soul is one that thirsts for truth and love. So when I heard that phrase, you don't know what you don't know, I started to humble myself and just be open to that. I don't know anything. So what if there's something out there, something that could help me answer my question, guide me, and it's totally different than anything I've ever experienced. That openness led me to such things, to discovering there are so many ways to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually that were outside of the medical model that I was raised with or the religious model that I was raised with. So it opened my heart and humbled me and taught me how to turn the volume down on my ego. So as far as advice, I would say to have trust and hope that there are answers beyond your little corner of the world. And that if you will seek those answers and be open to new and different thoughts, you will be amazed at how expanded you can be, how much you can evolve, and what is really true and possible.
I love it. That's great advice. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
The best way to reach me is through email, and it's soularevolution@gmail.com. And I'll tell you how it's written, all lowercase. Soul is SOUL period U period LAR period evolution EVOLUTION @gmail.com. I would love to hear from any of your listeners on what their takeaways were from today, or if they have any questions or would like my book list of the books I read that helped to change my life. I have a book list I love to share with people. I also have lists of guided meditations, all kinds of resources that help to support me during this time.
Thank you again, Angel, for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much. Having listened to some episodes, it's having access to inspiring stories that absolutely fuels resiliency. So I'm so grateful for you. It's like, but in that moment when you're so stressed or down and your mind doesn't really think clearly, but it's the stories of others that bring a little bit of light of, hey, look at what they've done. And I am a big fan of what you're doing, and you are championing hope. And it's so exciting. And the fact that you planted that in your heart, like you had that impression 2010, and then you have, again, it's like God delivered the how, right? It's like, I just need to prepare your mind that I want you to do this, and then I will help provide the means. It'll get easier,
Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for listening to Angel. And remember, there is a way through your difficulty. Please seek out resources and people who can and will help you. Now, if you're looking for alternative tools for handling difficult times or moving ahead in life, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Hope you all have a blessed day and a wonderful life. Goodbye.